What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. So today I got pinged like all hell regarding this video right here. Now, it's obvious why, okay? So first up, this is an interview between Loïs and Pablo from Dreaming Spanish. Now, Loïs, I've done a react to before. He made a video, I believe, about Pimsleur, and in that video, I actually spoke about Pimsleur as well and gave my experience because I completed all 5 levels of Chinese Pimsleur. Overall, the summary is that Pimsleur's okay if you just need something while traveling, and obviously, I'm testing Dreaming Spanish right now, which is what Pablo provides, and he's basically a big proponent of a methodology called ALG, and that's what Dreaming Spanish uses. Now, before I jump into and we start watching this video together, I'm not sure if we're going to get through the whole thing, but there will be a link in the description and pinned comment down below. But I do want to answer a couple of questions, which I do get from time to time. So first up, some people have asked me, do I plan to ask for an interview with Pablo? Realistically, I think my voice just cracked. Maybe I finally matured. I am a man! But realistically, I think I would only do that once I complete the 1,500 hours of Dreaming Spanish, because then, during any interview, I will be talking from, I'm not going to say a position of authority, but at least a position of knowledge. It won't be hypotheticals for me because I would have completed the program up until that point. Additionally, regarding any possible investigation into Pablo, at this stage I won't be doing it. The reason being is because it would seem biased, because I'm testing his methodology, and people, if let's say if the investigation turned out well, then people would just say I'm going to be sucking up to Pablo, or if it turned out badly, people are just like, oh, you're just trying to bring him down because of Dreaming Spanish. So at this stage, I'm just going to test his methodology, and then once we get to the end of it, that's when we can discuss, possible investigations and stuff like that. So we're going to watch this video. I'll speed it up a little bit. I am pumped. I'm ready to go. I've got some Pepsi Vanilla right here. Let's begin.
All right, guys, Loïs here, and today we have another interview, and this one has been requested by a lot of people, actually.
I can definitely see that. I think Pablo has almost become I was going to say deity figure. Deity. It's like dainty. No, like a deity figure among some of the polyglot community. They really look up to him and respect him in, a lot of ways. And if I think about it, we go back, 3 or 4 years ago, I don't think anyone really knew about Pablo. So, he's definitely gone up within the polyglot world.
Doing Pablo, who is well known for, the Dreaming Spanish, which, I was totally unaware of because, I'm not learning Spanish, but I looked into it and I thought it would be very interesting to talk with Pablo about Dreaming Spanish, but also about his language learning approach. So if you're not learning Spanish, that's totally fine. We're just going to talk in general terms. So
I really hope he's done some research on ALG. Otherwise, this will be the most pointless interview ever.
Pablo, could you introduce yourself and also try to convince people of why they should, because they just clicked on this interview. There are lots of videos on YouTube. Try to convince them of why they should stay here and listen to your advice.
Well, first, hi, Loïs. Thank you for inviting me over. Thing is, a few years ago, I was living in Japan and had been there for a few years and learned Japanese quite well, and realized, many people have been here for a long time. They haven't learned much. They think that's very difficult. But the way I've done it is quite simple. It's a lot of fun. You can learn without studying grammar for.
Okay, one thing I'm going to say straight up, these cuts between every sentence, it's starting to get to me already.
Hours, taking exams, and really any actual study. And realized that there was an opportunity to help people learn languages in a way that's much more relaxed, much more fun. And started looking into alternative ways of learning languages and things that kind of match with the experience that I had learning Japanese. Well, the story is actually much longer than that, but I found...
Okay, so just so you guys are curious, because I want to give a little bit more backstory. So with Pablo, my understanding is basically he's learned English, from when he was young. Then he's learned French, he's learned Japanese, he's learned Thai. His wife is Thai. He's currently learning Chinese. And I think, is that all of them? That may be all of them.
Comprehensible input. I found Stephen Strachan's theories, and I found a school that had implemented it in Thailand, where I went to learn Thai for 1 year to experience the method, to see how it works, to see if it works well. And after 1 year, I was pretty convinced. So I decided to apply it somehow, to really try to help people learn a language that way. And after a couple of kind of failed attempts.
And the method he's talking about is ALG, the automatic language growth method.
What I realized is that for people to learn the same way that I had learned in that school, but for people all over the world to be able to learn like that, we just needed content. We needed comprehensible input content. We needed content that was accessible for learners. I tried to learn before using that approach, tried to learn Chinese, looking for content online, tried to help people learn English that same way, but
This is something that's not really spoken about. I haven't seen anyone mention this very often, but the method that Dreaming Spanish follows is not exactly ALG, because what's meant to happen according to the ALG method is that you have teachers who are basically getting real-time feedback based on what you're doing. It's almost more similar to crosstalk in a lot of ways. But anyway, they'll sit there and they will be teaching and they'll be watching the students. And if the students seem to be struggling in their understanding, maybe they'll dumb it down or they'll rehash certain parts. So realistically, Dreaming Spanish does not follow ALG because, well, you don't have the teachers, constantly getting that feedback.
Was just not enough easy content for that to be possible. So I decided, okay, that content just needs to be made. And that's when I decided to start Dreaming Spanish. And well, now we've also expanded to Dreaming French. Hopefully in the future, we can also do other languages.
Oh, okay, I see. So this is going to be like dreaming French, dreaming Japanese. Guys, just a very, very quick announcement.
Okay, I'll let him do this announcement in a second. But also, there is a lot of methods that can be wrapped up around and kind of called all the same thing. So let's cover off a few of these, okay? So you've got ALG, which, as you guys, if you've been watching my Dreaming Spanish series, it's basically sit here watching, almost essentially TV, but like designed at a dumbed down level for your level and, speed and all that type of stuff. However, what ALG essentially is, at least in this version that Dreaming Spanish uses, is it's kind of direct method in some ways without the grammar instruction. So direct method is where you're taught the language via the language, okay? But here you're not actually getting taught the language, you're kind of getting shown the language, okay? And it's also got aspects of TPRS, which is another method where it's like, full body immersion basically in the language. And they also use written form and all that type of stuff. So it takes a little bit from everything.
And then we'll go back to the interview. But I have just created a community where you can interact with other viewers of this channel. You can interact with me, ask me questions, make suggestions about videos, and, give me feedback about videos, give me ideas and so on. So,
is this a school website? There is so many fraudulent polyglots on this website that I don't even trust this website anymore.
This community is here. I'll put the link in the description. It's completely free. There's nothing for sale. It's just for interacting with other people because I find that, YouTube comments, it's not so great. So I'll put the link to this in the description, completely free. You can interact with me and other people. All right, let's go back to the interview. Let's talk a little bit about specifically your experience.
Whoa, did they just swap sides?
In Thailand. So you told me that you spent a year in a school in Thailand, which is the school that, Matt from Matt versus Repent talked about. Could you describe what, your experience has been with this and what the end result, was, especially in terms of, speaking and understanding spoken Thai? Because my understanding is that this is a pretty hard language, even more so than Japanese, apart from the writing system, of course, but, the tones, and it just seems harder than Japanese.
Well, this school, basically you would buy a pack of hours. You could buy 10, 30, 100 hours and then freely attend any time when the school was open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And there were 3 levels. So you were at a certain level. You started at the beginner level and there was the intermediate class and the advanced class. And at some point when you consider you were ready, then you could move on to intermediate, then to advanced. In most classes, other than advanced, there were
I would actually be curious if my YouTube channel ever got big enough one day and I made enough money and I wasn't locked down by other responsibilities, I would be more than happy to go over in there and spend a year learning Thai at this school just to see if there's a real difference between, the effects with Dreaming Spanish versus, on the ground ALG.
2 teachers, and the 2 teachers would be speaking with each other and also communicating to the students. And it was a bit like a comedy show a lot of the time. A lot of the things you were doing were kind of like comedy. They would do sketches. Sometimes we would also do games. They would be speaking Thai all the time. There was no English whatsoever, even when you started. So you just had to get used to hearing Thai being used in context. They would draw on the whiteboard. They would bring in pictures, bring in objects to make things easier to understand. But yeah, there was no English coming from them. There was no translation. You were also not supposed to write down stuff, to use a dictionary, or to do any other kind of studying. There were no exams or no way of assessing your level other than the teachers just looking at you and checking if you're understanding what they're saying, basically. And so you could choose how many hours you would attend. So because of that, depending on the time of the day, sometimes I would go and I would be there by myself and be the only student. And sometimes the class were 20 people in one class. And so I was doing 6 hours a day, splitting it with some rest time, and did that for a year. And in total, I attended 100 lessons, 50-minute lessons, so 1,000 hours. And went through the levels, beginner, intermediate, advanced. And it was a pretty interesting experience, both because I learned to experience what it is like to acquire a language under those circumstances, and because of seeing also the other students, what they were doing and the kind of things that they were struggling with, right? So you asked me about the level of...
So if he did 6 hours a day for a year, let's look at time-wise how long that is. 2,190 hours if he theoretically went every single day.
How much I learned. So I'll start with that and then give you an idea of why I think that there was also some difference between different students. So when I finished there, I was at a level in which I could survive in Thailand. I could get by. I could go to a shop and ask for stuff. I get my point across. One thing that I remember is that by the end of my stay of my 1 year in Thailand, I had some issues with the agent of my rental apartment, and I had to leave early before the end of my contract. Couldn't find the agent. I called a phone number that it was not my agent. It was a friend or some kind of coworker of my agent who only spoke Thai. So we had to speak Thai on the phone, and I figured out how I could contact the landowner to figure out like the end of the lease and stuff. And I managed to do that. And then after that was in 2016. I was in Thailand from 2015 to 2016. And after that, I continued with my learning. And by that point, I would say I could understand kind of simple media, simple like TV shows, cartoons and stuff, but it was kind of barely there. There were still quite a few shows that I still could understand only a little bit. I had to do quite a bit more listening after that to be able to understand kind of any TV series, any TV dramas or movies and stuff. And
so my assumption is that's around 2,000 hours. He didn't specify the hours, but he's talking like a year period of time. And you could only understand kids shows after a year of 2,000 hours. That just shows you how much you need to scale this up for like languages that are further removed from English.
Because in that school, there was a reading class, but that was separate. You could choose to do it or not do it, and I didn't do it.
Okay, right.
So my reading was basically what I had picked up in context. By that point, I could read quite a few things, but it was just because I figured out of context, like, oh, this letter makes this sound, this letter makes that sound, this is that word, and kind of piece things together that way. But that I didn't spend a lot of time on it specifically, so that came quite a bit later. After that, I continued doing, crosstalk, which maybe you haven't heard about, is a kind of language exchange in which you are speaking the language that the other person is learning and the other person is speaking the language that you're learning. So
also, for those who are curious, I did my first hour-long crosstalk session just a few days ago. You'll hear about that in my Dreaming Spanish update. I plan to do more.
Each of you is speaking most times your native language, and you're practicing only your listening. You're listening the language that you're learning, but you're never practicing
online
speaking
or in person?
For the beginner levels, it's easier to do in person because you want to be doing the kind of techniques that they use in that school, like drawing, using pictures and gestures and stuff. It's easier if you do it in person. Starting at the intermediate level, then it's easier to do it online through video call. And by that point, my Thai, was at the intermediate level, so I could do crosstalk just with people that I kept in contact with. And then after a couple of years, I came back to Thailand. I came because of life reasons. I came to live here. During those 2 years, I had got to a level where then coming back here, I was pretty okay with that, with like watching like TV series and movies and really getting by in the country without many issues at all.
Okay. And I'm assuming that's, with Dreaming Spanish and probably the future projects that you have with, I don't know, Dreaming French and so on, this is sort of the same methodology that you're trying to reproduce. If I understand correctly, this is comprehensible input only. There's no grammar, there's no exercises and flashcards and so on. Do you think that maybe adding some deliberate learning would be beneficial, or is maybe your argument that, comprehensible input on its own is sufficient, and also it's pretty sustainable because people, have fun doing it. So it's a better approach.
Yeah, in general, I advocate for using only comprehensible input if the language that you're learning has enough amount of input for all levels, right? So yeah, the reason why we're making this content in Spanish and French is because otherwise it's hard to do. So if you're trying to learn a language that still doesn't have this amount of content, you may have to resort to other techniques to try to.
Okay, so I'm just going to provide my own little bit of input so far. So as you guys know, I am not completely through Dreaming Spanish. I am nowhere near it yet. However, I am approaching 400 hours, and based on my current experiences so far, if I could only tweak one aspect of this ALG methodology, let's say I'm doing 3 hours a day, I would drop 1 hour a day of input and put 1 hour a day of flashcards in there. And the flashcards would also be essentially comprehensible input, because on the front, you would have the audio for a word. So let's say casa for house, I think that's how it's pronounced. And then you would hear it, you'd have to think about what it is, and then you'd flip it over and you'd have a look, and on the other side, there'd be a picture of it. And you'd be like, oh, okay, cool, I got it right. Because I reckon that would massively, by like multitudes, like speed up the absorption process, because your brain doesn't have to try and find these words using some like random pattern, like recognition system as it's hearing all these sentences being thrown at it. Instead, it's going to hear this word enough times and go, okay, I know that's what it is. And then as you're listening, because you're still doing 2 hours a day, as you're listening a lot, you would get smashed with like all these sentences coming in, but your brain has already attuned to those specific nouns and stuff. And for the first, 100 hours or something, just the nouns would be enough. Just focus on like nouns for person, woman, man, these things. And really quite quickly, you would pick up all of these within like, I would say less than 10 hours. You could get what you would get with the current method in 50 hours. So 10 hours would be equal to 15 hours. So I feel like it can be massively optimized, as long as you're prepared to deal with the flashcards. Now, if you don't want to do flashcards and you just want to do the Dreaming Spanish method, that's great. But if you're looking for speed and a way to optimize this process, just that one tweak, massively speed it up.
Make the content that's out there comprehensible. Because I guess you know all Japanese all the time since you talk to Matt. So I come from there also. I learned Japanese that way, but without the flashcards. When I did it myself, I wasn't like against it. I didn't know what comprehensible input was. I just tried it and flashcards didn't work for me. So I did only the input part. Mm-hmm. And yeah, at that time for Japanese, it's what I had to do because there was no content specifically made for learners that was easy to understand at the beginner, at the intermediate levels. But if the content is there, yeah, I recommend doing that. Is an approach that doesn't require you to ask yourself, like, what should I be doing right now? Because you just should be getting more input. You should be getting input that's interesting to you. And that's okay. If it's a bit too easy, just make sure it's not boring and make sure that it's not too hard for your level. And that's it. You don't need to strategize here. Oh, when should I be learning this piece of grammar or that piece of grammar? When should I be practicing this or that? I think it's something that makes the process so much easier for most people that I would recommend is in general.
So if you've got like a deep set dislike for learning grammar, you don't even need to optimize the ALG method. Realistically, I don't even think you would need to like study grammar. You could still follow their method like for 90% of it. Just add flashcards for nouns and adjectives. That would be it. Audio flashcards. So you don't even need to focus on the writing or anything. Just listening to these words, the nouns and the adjectives. Now, obviously, with certain languages, they can change, the endings or prefixes, suffixes, stuff like that. But even if you just grab like the most common one and you listen to that, it will help your brain massively when it hears something similar to that.
My understanding, according to my research, is so with Dreaming Spanish specifically, you're saying that people, and I'm assuming here it's mainly English speakers, can go from 0 to a very, very good level in Spanish in about 1,500 hours using just videos. And
I really hope he defines this in more detail. What specifically you could reach around 1,500 hours.
Really unfamiliar with Dreaming Spanish, so I'm not exactly sure. So you're producing videos in Spanish that are adapted to different levels. What is the difference between the Dreaming Spanish videos, and what about if I just found, I don't know, some content like cartoons for kids in Spanish, for example? What is the sort of unique value proposition for Dreaming Spanish, I guess?
Okay, I'm going to, as a third party, if I was looking at the service, I'm going to provide what I think the unique value proposition of Dreaming Spanish is. It's just the content. You have enough content in one location, and it is at varying levels, so it's like it starts easier and then it gets harder. It's just content. That's all. That's the unique proposition. You could use Dreaming Spanish and you don't have to follow their method at all, and you will still get a massive benefit out of their service because there's just so much content.
So there are a few things. In the general idea of comprehensible input, cartoons for children can be comprehensible input. Usually they will become comprehensible input by around the kind of late intermediate or early advanced level. You can find some cartoons that become comprehensible input for you and therefore can be one of your sources of input, or if you can find enough of them that are interesting.
So based on what Pablo just said, cartoons for me should not be accessible yet at all, because I'm at what they would call the low end of the intermediate level in Dreaming Spanish.
You can even be your main source of input, and our approach and our recommendations account for that and can be part of your learning. I think what we provide is first content for complete beginners. You can really just start watching content knowing zero Spanish, and you'll start picking up words. And once you know enough words, if nouns, for example, then you can start seeing how words work with other words, how they connect, and you can start really picking up stuff, which before, well, I think it wasn't possible because I tried with helping other people learn English. I tried with Chinese, didn't work. So that's the reason why I started. I really started doing videos for beginners, for people starting from zero, because it really didn't exist at all. But besides that, what you have right now on our platform, because we do have our YouTube channel, but we also have our platform, dreamingspanish.com. And there you have all the content. I mean, you also have more content. We also have a premium subscription for additional content for subscribers. But the benefits themselves are that this content is rated by levels. So you can watch a video. If it's a bit too easy, you can choose a harder level and start watching content that really matches your level. If it's too hard, the same, you can go to a lower level. It makes it very easy. You don't have to wonder if you're watching a cartoon, oh, this is too difficult. Let me find something easier. And you may spend hours looking for something easier. And you may spend in the end more time looking for sources of input than actually consuming the input, right?
I will say my biggest issue so far with Dreaming Spanish around the intermediate level is there's just not content of interest to someone like me. And when I say someone like me, I mean like a stereotypical male. You're not going to find stuff that just interests me there. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to get into a gender war. This is just what people understand. Okay. A stereotypical male has certain interests, and they are not fulfilled there. And additionally, I love languages, and I pretty much watched everything about languages that I can on Dreaming Spanish at my level and below, and there's not too much. I'm assuming because they want to avoid their viewers from engaging with, grammar and these concepts and stuff like that.
And then our benefits is that we track your progress. You can very easily see what level you're at, how many more hours of input you need to get to the next level. And all this is done automatically by the website. So this is actually one of the main features that our users care about, is like seeing a clear path for like, how long is it going to take me to get to this level? What will I be able to do at this level? And they know they can just go there and press play and get their input without really having to do any method.
Okay, so we're like 15 minutes into this, and we've barely touched on the method. This is more almost like an advertisement up to this point for Dreaming Spanish. Loïs here hasn't, he obviously hasn't gone deep into what is the methods that are being used here. So I don't think we're going to get too much new information.
For that day of deciding what they're going to do, right?
And so if someone were to use Dreaming Spanish, you're saying that at about 1,500 hours at this mark, they will achieve a very advanced, near native fluency in Spanish. Is that?
Okay, so from what I've seen, the idea that they're proposing is you'll be at a B2 level and listening and possibly speaking at 1,500 hours. Definitely listening is what I've seen, but I haven't heard them say speaking-wise, unless obviously you practice speaking at the times that they recommend, but they haven't specifically said that. Now, back in the day, there used to be something at 1,500 hours, which was promising near-native fluency, but they've updated the roadmap since, so they've obviously pulled back on that claim.
Correct. Yeah, the way we word the thing is near-native practical usage of the language, so the kind of...
Okay, the near-native, that does not exist anymore, Pablo. You don't have that in there anymore. You've got functional usage of the language. That's all. You don't have the near native. So that is, I don't know if he's just forgetting how they've updated their own roadmap, but that's a very big difference between, near native and functional use of a language.
Of ways you can effectively use the language for, as in like to live in the country where the language is spoken, work, have a life even with a partner from the country, or do the things that people from those places like to do, like watching movies, read books, in terms of doing it effectively. We don't guarantee that like you're not going to make mistakes, or that you're not going to like stop to think for look for a word every now and then or something. That depends a lot on the person. But in terms of like practical usage of the language, 1,500 hours is what we found is usually necessary for an English speaker or for a speaker of another European language to learn Spanish well. And then it can be faster if you're a...
So speaker of English or another European language to learn Spanish well, 1,500 hours. I feel like if you speak another Romance language, that number should be smaller. Logically, because you're going to have more cognates out of the box. So realistically, I should be at 1,500 hours ahead of someone who's just an English speaker because of my background in Esperanto and fluency in the language.
French speaker, Italian speaker. Or it can take longer if you're running, again, Thai or Chinese, or the other way around. You're from Asia and learning a European language, right? So we have factors to account for those things.
Right. And I've seen that you've documented some pretty impressive success stories with Dreaming Spanish, going from, I think the one the ones I saw were, 0 to intermediate comprehension in a few hundred hours. Could you, share some specific examples?
0 to intermediate in a few hundred hours. Like, technically, according to their system, I'm at an intermediate level. But based on the videos I've done tests at, I struggle to understand B1 level content. So, yeah, let's see what Pablo's got to say.
Or stories about these case studies?
I mean, the one we know the most is Jonathan, which we interviewed in the channel for, I think we published the video for New Year, like a year and a half ago. And yeah, he's really impressive. He's British and he speaks, not that you would mistake him for a native speaker, but you can really notice like traits of Spanish speakers, specifically from Spain, like the way he uses slang, intonation, rhythm and stuff. You can really see patterns that, this guy has learned from Spanish from Spain, right? And it's quite interesting.
Wow, that's
okay. So here's the problem. Okay, I've got with this. So in order to have, because the idea between ALG is that at 1,000 hours you'll start to have like the inclination to just start talking, and at first everything's going to come out broken and whatnot, but you're going to have a mental idea of how the language sounds, okay? And therefore you're going to just pronounce things correctly, or at least you'll get them correctly pretty quickly, and then as you practice more, your sentences will start to be just grammatically correct, and etc, and then eventually it will come out like sounding like Spanish, okay, like proper Spanish, not like some English speaker who's just, learned from books and stuff like that. However, in order for it to come out sounding like Spain Spanish, that means he would have been listening to just Spanish from Spain on Dreaming Spanish, which is, you're definitely limiting your content. I think there's like 3 tutors that deal with that level of Spanish. There may be more in the advanced levels. So I'm actually curious. I want to check out that Jonathan interview. I'm hoping it's at a level that I can understand, because I do want to dig into it.
Great. Doing the research for this interview, I have found, I'm sure you're aware of, there are lots of Reddit threads asking essentially, does Dreaming Spanish work? I think one of the most common sort of comments where, well, you're promising 1,500 hours for near native fluency, or I don't remember exactly how this is termed, but 1,500 hours, from my understanding, is that sources such as the FSI, so Foreign Service Institute, they say that you can reach, B2, C1 proficiency, which is about, near native proficiency, I would say, probably a little bit less. You can reach that in 600 to 750 hours. So
okay, but what people are missing and forgetting about those estimates is that's classroom hours, and they assume that you do roughly the equal amount outside of classroom hours. So that would put you at the same amount of hours as what Pablo and Dreaming Spanish are proposing, okay? However, you will already be at a C1 level or whatever in speaking, writing, reading at that 1,500 hours, compared to Dreaming Spanish, where you'll definitely be listening wise, but speaking's another thing.
So some people on Reddit.
Oh, and then reading, I'm not too sure. Like, I haven't seen too many comments about reading wise what you would be around 1,500 hours. In fact, if there is anyone in Dreaming Spanish community who is at that point, at the 1,500 hours mark, let me know what you think your spoken, your comprehension, and your reading abilities are in the language. If you can kind of, just put it on the CEFR. I'm not going to investigate you or anything. I just kind of want to hear what you guys are saying.
And on YouTube have posted comments saying that, Dreaming Spanish, maybe it works, but it seems kind of slow. How do you respond to these concerns?
We haven't seen that. Like, if you see people who have spent years and hundreds of hours learning in a more traditional way and then come to Dreaming Spanish, usually they just start making progress so much faster.
Okay, you hear that? We've had people who have spent years studying traditional methods, then they come to Dreaming Spanish and they make massive progress. Those are not the correct test cases. Those are people who have been studying and have not been getting enough input to actually apply what they've been learning. Okay, so let's forget about those cases. We need to focus on the ones who are basically purists, is like what I'm doing. Where basically they've just used this method, because then we can get an idea of what's realistic with this method.
Sir? Specifically about the FSI, I think the kind of hours that you mentioned are classroom hours, and usually they assume an equivalent amount of time of study by yourself, like
correct. Pablo's calling him out correctly here.
Homework. So in the end, if you look at the numbers, it comes out to about the same number. My doubt is like really people who have learned with us and who have learned doing class study with the FSI, are they really going to be at the same level? That's something I really haven't like studied like the results of the FSI method. And if really people who learn that way, even if they can take exams and be at a B2 level, do they really have the same level of comprehension? That's the question that I would like answer, right? Because I think after having got so much sum of input, I would expect like your level of comprehension and just being so much more confident being around an environment where the language is spoken to be much higher with our approach.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like that's not based on any provable evidence at this stage, because realistically, all of these areas, speaking, reading, comprehension, they all cross-pollinate, basically. They help one another. So if you read something and then you listen to something else later on, you've got kind of that assistance that you got from reading previously, you know, that almost input, you could say, from reading previously, where you might not have got that in the listening. And it's the same thing with speaking. When you practice speaking, you basically focus in on the specific sounds of words in order to pronounce them correctly. And therefore, when you're listening, you have a better, like, almost audible understanding of the language as it's coming in, because you've focused in on those sounds, as opposed to with, you know, just a pure input method, where it's kind of like you're just getting like a blurry shell of the word.
And I think speaking of, you know, controversies, I guess, I think one of the most probably controversial aspect of dreaming Spanish and your method in general is, you know, people saying that you are telling them not to speak for, I saw on Reddit, it was probably like 300 plus hours.
No. It's actually much longer than that. So you're not recommended to start speaking until 600 hours unless you want to start speaking. However, it's recommended 1,000 hours.
So the first 300 plus hours, just don't speak, just, you know, comprehensible input.
It seems like he's done all his research off of Reddit as opposed to going to their actual, you know, roadmap that's on the website.
And this goes against, you know, a lot of people feel that they should speak from day one and so on. How do you convince these people who want to speak from day one that this is probably not in their best interest?
It's not essential to the approach. It's not essential to using our platform. Like many people who haven't bought into the idea, this is just dreaming Spanish, just one source of input, one source of practicing listening, and that's fine. Yeah, like the reason why I think it's a good idea to leave speaking and reading for a bit later on, and why that results in a more natural feeling for the language, less mixing up with the grammar of your own language, with the pronunciation of your own language, is all written out in the blog in quite a few videos that I've made. And that's, yeah, I don't know that I do a very good job convincing.
Essentially, the argument is by waiting until 1,000 hours, you have a better understanding of the language. You have like an internal voice of the language, and therefore when you start pronouncing words, you'll hear your own mistakes and be able to correct them instantly because you know what the language should sound like. And I can get that. Like that makes sense to me, okay? Regarding grammar and stuff, I don't know, like the evidence for that is definitely not there, and realistically, you just got to look at anyone who's like, you know, spent a lot of time in a country or grew up in a multilingual family where they never spoke, okay? And they've heard the language their entire life, but basically they've never spoken it, so therefore, you know, they just, when they do speak it, they sound like any other foreigner speaking that language.
People about that, because even in our own subreddit, there are plenty of people who often write like arguments against that idea. But yeah, that's it basically.
And what about, there is another piece of information I got, I don't remember if it was from your website, but this is a little bit more rare, I suppose. You're suggesting that to delay reading, meaning that, you know, just do some listening and then reading is going to come, you know, later on. Why do you think reading may be harmful for beginners, and how do you know when someone is ready to start reading?
Okay, I'll let him answer this in a second, but they also recommend around 1,000 hours from memory. Okay, so I actually so there's so many issues around the method so for example, when you start reading, so I've asked this question before, I'm like, is shadowing allowed? So like I listen to someone reading this and then I just repeat after them. Now, assuming I'm doing this at 1,000 hours, I should understand everything I'm hearing, but I'm also practicing, you know, pronouncing the language exactly like a native would. And the pushback, like there's like two groups. One group's like, yeah, that's perfectly fine because, you know, you're reading. You're just basically reading out loud. And another one's like, no, you cannot do this because you should only be speaking when you're actually using the language, not like, you know, doing shadowing or something, which is not to them seen as using the language. So it's like, where does this fall in the spectrum? And I haven't seen this actually written out anywhere in, you know, the Dreaming Spanish method, what their thoughts on this are. And another one is the crosstalk, which was mentioned early on, but it's not being discussed now, probably because Loïs here doesn't know too much about it, but like it's In some spots of Dreaming Spanish, it's recommended that you do crosstalk, and they even say it's the most efficient method to make progress. But then again, in other spots, it says if you don't enjoy just listening, then there's also the option of crosstalk. So it's like, is crosstalk required, or is it just something additional that you can do? And I think the reason it's not stated whether it is required or not, it's because it's not something we can monetize via Dreaming Spanish. Not easily, okay? Maybe in the future we can. They'll have like a teacher section of, qualified teachers who know how to do crosstalk, and you can hire them directly through the website, and, the website will get a cut of that. But at this stage, it's like crosstalk is kind of in this gray area. It's like, yeah, it's recommended in some areas, but in other areas it's only recommended as if that's something you want to do. So it's like, is it actually part of the method or not?
There are two reasons why to wait a bit to read. The first one, if you're starting from zero, there's just not going to be input that's comprehensible at that level. So if you try to practice reading, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be hard. It's going to be like a lot more work than just sitting down and listening to somebody who's using drawings and pictures and stuff to communicate. Other than that, once you're at the level in which you can find text.
There is one good benefit to this, okay? So with the reading side thing, you can tell straight away if someone's bullshitting about learning via this method or not. If they say they've had amazing progress sub 500 hours or whatever. Because as soon as they say, oh yeah, I could read texts and send texts and stuff, it's like, bro, you haven't done any reading at this point. How can you do that? So that's like a great way of just straight up knowing if someone's bullshitting about how they learn, or if they've had previous experience learning the language.
You can find graded readers that are at your level, that you know enough of the vocabulary to read it and to understand what's going on. Even there, I do recommend waiting a bit if you care about your pronunciation, if you care about your accent, if you want to have a lot of input, of listening input, so you can build a good, strong mental image of the language that you're learning without mixing it with your native language, with other languages that you may already know. I recommend waiting, because if you don't, then you're reading a text, but you don't have that strong mental image. Inevitably, you're going to be making connections between those letters, and either sounds that you already know for those letters in your language, or connecting them to the sounds that you think these letters make in the language that you're learning, because you've studied those sounds, but you don't really have a clear mental image of what they sound like. So what you hear in your own head when you're reading is your own accent in the language that you're learning, which if you're just starting, it may be quite a strong accent, and that's going to be very hard to get rid on later on. So
there is definitely ways to solve this though. So for example, when I do my Chinese videos, as you guys know, I'm probably like an intermediate level of Chinese, okay, like low and intermediate. Yet my pronunciation of Chinese is really good, okay. However, my grammar is shit, and I don't have a very big vocab, which is what I'm working on as part of my Chinese series. So you can actually get your pronunciation down pat from the beginning, as long as you actually focus in on that for a period of time. And I know it's not exciting, because it's not like the exciting part of learning a language is like drilling sounds and stuff. And if you get input from a native who can correct you in the super early stages. So in my case, my wife was probably the person who corrected me the most when I started out. Yeah, and Chinese people are like that. They'll focus in and they'll be like, you're making a mistake here, fix this. And like quite quickly, you'll get good at the sounds of the language if you have someone focus in on the sounds with you in those early stages before you start like really fossilizing those bad habits. So you don't have to wait for 1,000 hours. You just need someone to clean you up when you're starting.
Why bother? Why not just do it later and not have to deal with then having to fix this, right?
Right. So you said that you had as a project to sort of expand this method for other languages. In the meantime, for people who are...
Of course, he's going to expand this to like all the major languages. Like, think about it. This is a fucking amazing business idea. Essentially, you have a subscription service that you're going to be locked into for several years, okay? Just sitting on their website, absorbing their content. Like, bro, that's like every subscription service's dream. This is the perfect service, okay, from a business perspective. So, of course, he's going to open this up to other languages. It'll be French, and then he's literally just going to go down the list of the most popular, probably European languages, as they'll be the most ones to, produce content. And then later on, maybe down the track, you'll get to, like, Japanese and, Chinese and stuff. But, like, it'll be the European languages straight up.
And I'm thinking specifically of languages where there's not as much comprehensible input available, not as much content. Like Spanish is sort of okay, I guess. You can find, lots of telenovelas or stuff like that.
This is a pure business decision. So it's going to depend on how many learners are available. Doesn't matter if there's content already available for it. He'll hit that market.
That are fairly interesting, although not super comprehensible if you're at a low level. So if there are people learning, more like, Thai, for example, or stuff like that, how do you suggest that they, build their own comprehensible input sort of sources? Because you've done this before, right? But it seems kind of hard.
Well, Thai, I don't know if it's a great example because I think there's actually more hours of content in Thai than in Spanish. There's a YouTube channel on, Comprehensible Thai on YouTube that actually just pump out content for free, totally for free. I don't know how good they are at the starting level. Like if you're really starting from zero, I don't know how much content there is there, but in total, they have like a lot. But if you're starting something that really, let's say, has content for learners at all, then I think your best bet is crosstalk until you get to the level where, you can find like series or maybe even move to the country.
Funnily enough, I've actually had people ask me if I would expand out and do a YouTube channel for Esperanto and comprehensible input type of content where basically, I'd have different levels of me speaking Esperanto, just doing whatever, okay? And although that's like not my preferred method, I did query the community about it, but doesn't seem to be like enough interest to make it financially viable for me.
Or something. I really recommend doing crosstalk. Honestly, I recommend doing crosstalk for everybody, even for Spanish. When I've written about crosstalk, I always mention that it's worth your time, like more than even using our content. Like if you can choose between spending 1 hour watching videos or 1 hour doing crosstalk, I think you're going to learn more just doing crosstalk. Of course, in practice, it's harder to set up. You have to find a partner. You have to schedule a time. You have to make sure that they don't bail on you. So it's more effort and understand. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, right? Because it's very practical, very convenient for many people to learn. But yeah, if you can do crosstalk, it's a great experience because not only I think you acquire more per hour doing that, but also, of course, you're connecting with a person, with a speaker of the language, with a person from the country that supposedly you have some interest in. You're making friends, you're making that kind of connection that's going to not only help you learn, but also motivate you to want to continue learning, right? And this may be easier or harder depending how easy it is to find speakers of that language. So that's going to depend on where you live, if you can go to the country or not, if you're already at the intermediate level and can do...
So this is what I'm curious about, okay? So with crosstalk, he talks about how it's a lot more valuable per hour, okay? Because the assumption here is that when you're speaking with someone, if they say something you don't understand, you can literally just ask them to reword it until you understand it or define it in Spanish, okay? But is crosstalk required? Okay, not required, but like that 1,500 hours to get to a B2 level in comprehension or possibly higher, okay? Is that taking into account crosstalk? And if it is, so then how much crosstalk would be required for that? Now, I know this is a really hard thing to define because like, unless you got specific test cases or whatever like that you can point at, it's hard to say, but it also feels like for me, when I see people, falling behind the recommendations of what Dreaming Spanish say you should be at this level, people always say, oh, you should be doing more crosstalk. Like, it's almost used as a bludgeon in a way to say like, well, the problem is you haven't done crosstalk. But at the same time, is it actually required for those 1,500 hours to get to the level that they promise or not? You kind of see what I'm getting at?
Video call instead of having to meet in person. Not necessarily, like you can still do video call even if you're starting from zero, but you're going to need some way of maybe drawing, maybe sharing your screen while drawing on a digitizer pad or something. You can still find ways to do it.
And I think what he's talking about there is more kind of direct method where you've got the drawings and you're talking. They don't do this at the intermediate level realistically in Spanish, except for Pablo's really old videos. They should do this a lot more. During the entire intermediate level, there should still be drawings and stuff popping up. There should be still, random pictures and things. At the intermediate level, they pretty much, in all the new content, just start talking. Okay. And although at this level, you kind of want to be slowly moving away from that, like I feel like there should still be a lot more visual aids just in order to speed up the process.
Right, yeah, that's pretty interesting because my experience specifically with Japanese is that I just do, standard language exchange where maybe we talk for an hour and 30 minutes is like 100% Japanese, so listening to Japanese, but I'm also speaking in Japanese. And then we do, the opposite in the other 30 minutes. But I'd never heard of crosstalk. It sounds like a pretty good idea. I'm just wondering, in terms of, finding crosstalk, partners, I don't know if there are websites or resources that you could recommend to find people.
Yeah, like there are no platforms or places specific for crosstalk. I mean, there may be some now. There may be on Reddit like Crosstalk Exchange or something. You can try looking for those, but they're probably not that popular yet. So usually when I found a partner, it's either been through the common methods, either the mobile apps, what is it, Tandem, or
Right.
There's a subreddit, I think, Language Exchange. You can try there and just finding a person and explaining to them what you want. Most people don't know what it is. Some people are not going to want to do it. So usually I'll message 10 people and maybe 4 or 5 will reply. And then to those people, I'll explain what it is and maybe 1 or 2 will want to do it.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, it's some people have like fear of rejection. They go on these platforms and kind of wait to be messaged. That's a bad idea. Usually you want to.
The focus again is here on crosstalk, and yet crosstalk is not in any way provided by Dreaming Spanish. It's recommended. It's not required, but everyone talks about it, and yet the service itself has no way of providing crosstalk to you. So it's almost as if you're getting, I don't know, like maybe 50% or 80% of the method via Dreaming Spanish, and then the rest of the method you're expected to go out and find a way to do it yourself. Okay? Which is, I guess, fine, as long as you're upfront about that from the start, saying, you know, we can provide 80%, and then the rest you're gonna have to go out, you're gonna have to do hundreds of hours of crosstalk, okay? Either free, you know, find someone and work with them, or, you know, pay someone, but like that expectation should be set from the beginning, as opposed to where it is on the roadmap is kind of just something that's like, you know, it's recommended, but you don't have to do it.
Be the one who messages first, because I do get messages, but like is a person that doesn't even have like an overlap of languages that I want to learn and they want to learn. So I don't know why they're even messaging me. Like, is it spam or I don't know.
Yeah.
So usually you want to message first.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop right here. Otherwise, I'm going to end up watching this whole goddamn video. The link will be in the description below. You guys can go watch it. I'm a little bit sad that Loïs here did not like dig into their methods a lot more, like actually understand. It seems like he read some Reddit posts and, you know, just he's gone really surface level. There's so much you could dig into this, and like there's so many like good questions that you could give Pablo here on specific, you know, around the crosstalk thing, like the questions I'm literally asking right now around the questions of shadowing and stuff like this. But I feel like you can't really ask those questions if you haven't tried out the method, which is why I don't just shoot something out of the gate. I go try it out first so that I know the questions that need to be asked. Anyway, yeah, well, we'll see. When I reach 1,500 hours, I'll probably have completely different questions, you know, based on his experience, and then also my own full analysis of the process. But yeah, if you've enjoyed this goddamn long reaction video of mine, you know what to do. Like, sub to the channel, all that good stuff, and go check out Loïs's one, because obviously he put in the hard work to actually do the interview here. And that's pretty much it. I'll see you all in the next video, and if you're not there, well, I'll be doing crosstalk with you in your sleep.